Hello, everyone. Happy April, and welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Scribe, and I am so excited to begin the month of April chock full with a bunch of new guests, new authors, new historians, new everybody. It is incredible. And I'm so excited to introduce our first guest of the month. My guest today is a book coach and developmental editor who specializes in fantasy, science fiction, speculative fiction, and historical fiction. She uses character driven feedback to help authors write and revise their manuscripts so they can tell emotionally impactful, magical stories. Believing that everything is connected in fiction and that it all comes back to characters, she pays extra attention to characterization and its influence on every element of the story when she's coaching an author or working on a developmental edit. Authors she's worked with have described her as empathetic, intuitive, and insightful. Her favorite thing is hearing that they regain their confidence and enthusiasm to write. She loves the power of words, stories to reveal a new perspective, to bring hope, and to change the world. She's passionate about helping authors realize their dreams and impact the world around them. And she would love to work with any author to make their book shine. So let us give a huge round of applause to today's guest, Becca Johnson Leigh. Becca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome, awesome. So before we dive into the major questions, anything more about your background as a book coach that you would like us to know about?
Yeah, I've been doing this I did the math recently and we're coming up on 3 years. So
Oh,
yeah, I didn't
nice.
realize. Yeah, so exciting. And like you said, I just really am passionate about story and authors and getting as many books out there as we can, but like quality, as well, where
Right.
like you said, we are impacting the world. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want authors to feel like they can put that best version of their book out there and feel really confident in that. Yeah, so.
Awesome, awesome. And speaking of the books, what are some of the more recent projects that you have worked on that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, so I've worked on some multiple different genres. I've done stuff like a paranormal romance fairly recently.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. If you want to check out Angeline Ashira's stuff, that's good, and you can find it on Amazon. I've also worked on this one that was like, oh, what would you call it? It's a fantasy one, I would say. It's like a fantasy ace rep monster romance. That one's really cool.
Okay.
Daphne Crancy, unforgettable. Yeah, so, and I've worked on lots of other different genres. You were mentioning some of the ones that I specialize in. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to get even more specific, I've done stuff like YA high fantasy. One of the first ones I worked on was this really cool time travel fantasy sci-fi one, which is really
Okay.
fun because it was like trying to figure out how all the different weave or webs or like all the threads of the time travel weave together. I
Right.
guess I'm trying to say. I've done, romantic fantasy, supernatural fantasy, a couple speculative historical fictions, which are really fun. I love like alternate
Nice.
history and like what if sort of questions. Um, yeah, and mythology retelling because I love mythology retellings, fairy tale retellings. So I'm always excited when I get to work on those too. So yeah, done a lot of different genres in that like bigger realm of fantasy and sci-fi.
Nice, nice. So you, as you said, you've touched a whole bunch of different genres, different styles of voice for different authors. That takes, I imagine, a lot of skill and a lot of training and a lot of research into this career. So let's start with that. When did you decide that being a book coach and a developmental editor was something that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, so I have a best friend who's also my roommate, and she is an editor as well. And we love to like sit down and talk about, different books that we've read and analyze
Right.
them and like, oh, they did this thing and oh, wasn't that so cool how they pulled this, twist off, or the way the characterization was, worked in this particular book, or oh, this thing happened, it would be even stronger if this thing had been done instead, so analyzing it. And I was, at the time, I had been a piano teacher for over a dozen years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was a traveling piano teacher, and I really wanted to do something that I could do from home. It was, after COVID and all that stuff.
Right.
So yeah, and so trying to figure out what that would look like. And during one of our conversations, my friend was like, I've heard of this thing called a book coach. You would make a really good book coach. You should look into that, So, and I was like, what is this? Because it's not, or especially then, it wasn't as well known of a thing, right? People are like,
Right.
what's a book coach? It's fairly new. Excuse me. So I found a book by Jenny Nash that's called Read Books All Day and Get Paid for It, I believe is what it's called, that talks about like the business side of book coaching. And the more I read it, and she talks about like what sort of skills you need and what sort of even like personality would work well for this.
Right.
And the more I read it, I was like, this sounds like me. And this sounds so fun, especially since this is stuff that I'm thinking about anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I
Definitely.
feel so passionate about it. And I'm constantly reading and analyzing all that stuff. I can't turn that part of my brain off really. So might as well put it to good use. So I started taking a course through Jenny Nash's Author Accelerator, and learned that stuff, and actually started working before getting the certificate, because I was like, I understand the way this works now, and I did
Right.
different practice things and open for business and got busy doing that. So it was really cool. And then yeah, just kind of figured out from there, what sort of things do I want to offer, where do my strengths lie, how can I best serve authors, and refining my offer suite as I went along. So
Nice. So there is
yeah.
like schooling classes that you would have to take to like be certified as a booker, which I didn't know. And I would imagine the classes may be like tailored depending on, okay, if you want to be a book coach specialized in fantasy, here are the things you'll probably have to learn, or for historical fiction, or is it kind of like that, or is it more of like a general sense?
It's more general. They have some things in there that it's like, if you're working on a fantasy, you're going to want to pay attention to world building, and here are some things that might come up. If you're doing historical, you're going to have to, look at research and stuff like that. But as far as like the way that they have it divided up, they have a nonfiction or memoir track, and they have a fiction track.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's more that way instead. And you don't actually have to be like certified. It's not like an official thing out there, but it helps because then you can get that extra teaching, and it's
Right.
very rigorous. So much, the course is so long. There's so much stuff.
Right.
It's really, really comprehensive. What was I going to say about that? Oh, but the other benefit is that when you get that certificate from them, it allows you to be on their directory as well, and to get clients that way as well. So it's that extra boost, if you will. But yeah, it's
Right.
not a requirement necessarily, but it definitely helps to have that
Wow.
experience. You know?
This is really, really fascinating, that this is a huge thing about the book world, which I don't think a lot of people really take into consideration, especially when looking for like author coaches or even editors. And I actually had one of my friends talk about this, saying that, being an editor for like a friend story is one thing, but if you want to make like a career out of this, you definitely understand, as you said, you have to know, okay, if it's fantasy, you got to look at, okay, how the world building, does it make sense? Does your lore make sense? Because if I'm getting confused by this, more than likely your readers will definitely get confused by that. So with that in mind, when working with your clients and trying to help them, fine tune their projects, what is a need or desire you want to satisfy for your clients? Like, what is that?
Yeah. So the thing with a lot of authors, and I'm sure, any authors watching this can definitely relate with this, is that you have a vision in your head. You
Mm-hmm.
know what that book wants or what you want that book to look like, but it doesn't always end up on the page that way.
Right.
There's like that moment where it's like, well, why I want it to be this, but it's not. It's this instead. How do I get it there? So
Right.
that is a big part of it, is bringing that outside perspective in to be like, okay, I know your vision, because I like to talk with my clients ahead of time and find out like
Right.
what is the why behind your book, what is the, are there themes you want to have in here, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want it to look like? And then look at it and be like, okay, here's where I see a gap, and provide possible solutions for how we can take it to where they want it to be. Because part of the problem too is, I don't know if you've heard of the curse of knowledge, but it's basically when like I know something, and so I forget that other people might not know it, or
Oh,
you know
yes. I
yeah,
know what you're talking about.
yeah.
Yes.
Or it's like, well, I know that my character would be angry if so and so said this to them. And so you just assume and you don't put it in the book, but
Right.
maybe the other person would react. Maybe they'd be sad or something, instead.
Right.
And so
Yes.
they're be like, oh yeah, the character's sad, and then find out later they were angry. And so there's this disconnect there as well.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah, so it's really good to like look for those missing things. And like I said, just to help bridge that gap between what the book currently is and what it is that they want it to be. Because there comes a point where it's like you can, revise your own story over and over again, but
Right.
eventually it's like you can't really see it for what it is anymore because you've read it so many times.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
100%. And I also think for every author, be indie, traditional, whatever background we are, whenever we
Yeah.
finish a story, we finish the first draft, it's like we're done. This is it. But that's just half of the battle. You've just got the idea down on paper. Now it comes to the fine tuning. And then going back to what you said about the curse of knowledge, is like, well, I know what happens in my story, but there may be that disconnect. And I think for new authors, whenever they approach an editor, there is kind of that hesitancy. It's like, is this editor the best one for me? Because I'm sure you may have done research that some editors may completely tell the reader to abandon the project that they currently have spent years working on and start over. Or on the other side of the coin, they say, this is great, this is perfect, just need to fine tune things. So in that initial engagement with a client that you're working with, what is your promise you're making to them?
Yeah. So the promise that I make to them is that we're going to do what all we can to take that story to that next level.
Mm,
So, whatever that looks like for them. But I'm not going to abandon them to it.
right.
and it's going to, the feedback that I give them is going to be honest, but also kind, because I think it's really
Yes.
important to have those two paired. You were saying, sometimes there's that hesitancy because I think that editors sometimes have a reputation of being like mean, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So like, or whatever. And it's like, I don't want to be that editor. I feel like that isn't necessarily the most helpful thing. Like you said, they've
Mm-hmm.
worked on this thing for years, and then to tell them, oh, just throw it away. Like, no. There is, we can do something for this. It's just a matter of figuring out what that is and working together to make that happen. And then, tied in with that, it's that I want my clients to feel really confident
Right.
and going back to their writing and like, okay, I have a game plan now. Becca's given me some ideas, or
Mm-hmm.
some, even if they don't go with the idea that I threw out there, it sparks a different idea. Like there
Right.
was a call where I was doing a coaching call with a client, and they asked me, what would you do what are some suggestions you have for this character arc? And I threw out like, 3 or 4 different suggestions, and they didn't do any of those, but one of those sparked an idea for what they wanted to have happen.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so even if they don't take those specific things, it's like a launching point for like, oh, she said that thing. Oh, what if I just tweaked it a little bit and had this happen instead? So it gives them that confidence again, like I said, to move forward and also just have that clear direction. Because I know that
Right.
oftentimes it's like when you have this huge draft that you finished, you're looking at
Yes.
it and it's like there's so much, right? Like where do
Mm-hmm.
you start? And so I'd like to give them a game plan, if you will.
Right.
Um, yeah, for example, if I were doing like a developmental edit for someone, at the end of that editorial letter, it's going to have a list of next steps. And it's going to say, I recommend starting, we'll say with the character arc. And then once, you've worked that out, then I would move to this thing. And then I would move to this thing. And as you change each one, it's going to have a ripple effect. So it might even solve some of the other ones down the line, but
Right.
it gives them an idea of where to even start so that they aren't giving themselves some more work by
Right.
starting in the middle
Mm-hmm.
and having to backtrack and change things that are going to
Yes.
change other things and then making it messier. So it's a way to keep them organized and make it less overwhelming, I guess is what I'm trying to say there. So
I definitely think that is important because especially when it comes to like the editing process, I know I've tried to do self-editing. It is not easy because it's hard when the author has to critique their own work. It's like, this is really not what it wants to do. But that's why it's important to have editors because they have a clean perspective. They can tell you if this needs to be changed or this needs to be cut out. And it hurts, but sometimes it is necessary. And with all that you've mentioned, Becca, would you say that your promise to your clients has been validated over the years?
definitely. Yeah. I've heard so many authors, either in the testimonials that they write for me or even at the end of a call that we're doing together, they'll say things like, I feel so much more confident now, or like, okay, I'm excited again. I was feeling kind of, like about my book. And now that we've had this talk, I'm excited to actually go and edit.
Right.
And so, yes, I would say definitely.
Awesome. And speaking on reviews, now I'm going to go a little back in time. So when you just started out as a book coach and developmental editor, and you got your first project with the client and going through all the hours, all the calls, all the discussions, what was that initial feedback like from that very first client?
I'm thinking back because that was a couple of years ago. I remember she was very, very grateful, and she said that I noticed a lot of things that you know she hadn't really picked up on. Where it's like, oh, I forgot about that thing, or oh, you're right. I didn't notice this thing that's missing. Or it was also cool because she was very excited to hear the positive feedback that I gave her as well, where she's like,
Right.
hearing me say to her, you are really strong in this particular area. You should definitely lean into that. And I think that really encouraged her as well. And there was something where I was like, I recommend cutting this thing because it doesn't really serve the plot or the character
Right.
arc in any way. And it was interesting because she was like, yeah, as soon as I read that in your editorial letter, I totally agreed. It was an inside joke that I put in there with my husband, and no one else was going to get it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
she was like, yes, and in some ways, it actually kind of was a relief for her because it was like being told she could let it go, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So yeah, she was very, very happy with the work and felt a lot more confident about it because there were a lot of moving parts in that one as well. So I think it helped to have that clarity.
Nice. And I think it also gives a sense of validation for you too, Becca, because as you said before, doing all the classes, all the research, it's one
Yeah.
thing to learn everything and then put it into practice and practicality. And then it's another thing entirely to actually get feedback from it. It's like, oh, what I actually learned is actually, it's
Yeah.
paying off. It's almost the same thing for authors too. And we actually write the message that we're trying to convey and our readers pick it up and it's like, oh, they figured it out. They actually got it. And that's always, I think, the most important thing in any aspect of the book, either the edit or the reader. And it's just so incredible
Yeah.
And going down along the line, what would you say is sort of like your motivator to go the extra mile for your clients, for their projects? What is your why?
Yeah, so my why, I kind of touched on it at the beginning a little bit, but to expand on it, I really, really believe in the power of stories and of books, to not only change, the world, but even just change a person's life, in big ways and small ways,
Right.
um, where it can make an impact where it's like we don't even realize maybe they needed an escape for the day, maybe they needed to laugh, maybe, and there's also seeing from a different perspective, and
Right.
it helps foster empathy. It helps people learn about other perspectives. It helps us to explore in like a safe place.
Right.
What if this happened, especially like sci-fi sort of stuff. What
Right.
if we did that? What would that look like? What would be the repercussions? And so it's really, they're very powerful in the way that they can change hearts and minds. And so I'm really humbled and honored that I get to be a part of that, to be part of putting that good into the world, and making an impact on individual lives, and thus from there making an impact on the world at large as well. Yeah, and supporting authors and getting to put their stories out there, because I know how much of a dream that is, and how
Yes.
how wonderful that is for them to have that moment, like you said, where it's like you're holding the book
Hmm.
and it's like, oh, it's a real thing. And getting to be a part of that, like I said, it makes me tear up.
Yeah, and I
So
definitely
yeah.
think it is, again, as you say, it's a huge thing. And I also think another thing also to talk about when it comes to the edit, which is another realization, and I also had to learn this as well, which is taking the time. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I definitely think one of the dangers for new indie authors, and I've also experienced as well and fallen to this, is that we think the book is done, we think it's perfect, we've done our own revisions, and we want to send it out. And I think when it comes to editors, and I think for book authors, they're always there to like tell us, you know, have another set of eyes look at it, take your time. And I'm sure you probably have had to tell a lot of authors that you've worked with that take your time, look over it again. You don't have to put this out right now. I mean, you wrote this over a period of years. I'm sure you can wait for just a few more days or a few more months. And I
Yeah.
think when it comes to that aspect, the anxiety of when do we actually put this out, the story, it's nerve wracking. But I definitely think, as you would agree, Becca, it's important to wait and to reflect. And there's one favorite quote that I have is write drunk, edit sober, because you just put everything down on the page, look at it with the clear eyes. After when the edits are done, even when you think it's perfect, take a step back from it. And then after a few days, look over it again and then see, have you had those kind of discussions with authors who've been like very eager and excited and caught up in the moment to publish their book?
Yes, definitely. Where it's like, step away from it, maybe take a week or something, do something else entirely, because then you can come back to it with fresh eyes. Like you said, you might notice things that you hadn't before, and there is no rush, especially if you are doing, like self-publishing, or you're an indie
Right.
author. You're setting your deadlines, right?
Yes.
You're the one putting that pressure on yourself. If you're like, it needs to be done in the next month and all this stuff like that, leave room for yourself, especially if you want to edit, or like if there's other stuff that needs to change as well, because maybe you need to get the cover art ready, you need to write the blurb, you
Yes.
need to market, all that stuff. And so I think rushing actually hurts it, in all those
Hmm.
areas, editing, straight on down the line. Don't rush, take your time. Your book's only going to be better for it if you take that time.
Definitely. And kind of like a little tangent, but definitely on one that's interesting. Have you ever had an experience with a client where they, let's say they've already gotten the cover art and they're now working with you on the story, but the story that they've written does not reflect the cover art. and they're two
Uh-huh.
separate things. Have you ever had that instance, and how have you sort of like worked around with the author to sort of like make sure that the cover and the story match, because the cover is literally the first thing someone's
Yeah.
going to look at. And if the cover does not reflect the story, or the story does not reflect the cover, there's not going to be a connect. It's going to be like, wait, this does not make any sense.
Yeah. Um, Thankfully, I haven't had that happen for an author. But yeah, I definitely think that it's kind of like what's that phrase? Don't put the wagon. What is it? Don't put the carriage before the horse. What is the actual phrase? Something like that.
I don't know.
Phrase. But basically, like write your story first and then do the cover art. If possible.
Yes.
Um, so that you can have that match and so that you're not trying to shove it into something that it's not going to fit in necessarily. Maybe your story changes. You're like, oh, actually, I want it to be this. It doesn't fit the cover
Yes.
art anymore. Now I have this pretty cover art that I can't use for anything. And that really would really be a bummer. So,
Yes,
yes, I
definitely.
recommend not doing that. I did once work with an author who, like, she was trying to rush herself in like I've already booked a cover author or a cover artist, and while we're doing the developmental edits, and so she didn't know like what size she needed the binding to be and stuff like that, and so it was kind of like wait to book that if possible for when
Yes.
you know that your revisions are going to be done, if that's going to affect the cover art, so that
Yes.
you're not feeling pressured to hurry up and make all these suggested edits. And it's just like I said earlier, the more you rush, the less happy you're going to be with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely, Becca. And now
Yeah.
we're going to turn over to the business side, because I definitely think it's important to talk about the business side of being a book coach and developmental editor. So, when you began this journey of yours and going through the classes, the trainings, who did you sort of like reach out to sort of like get more clarity of how to approach this career path?
Yeah. So you know how I signed up for the author accelerator stuff.
Right.
They have a community on there actually, of both alumni and current students and mentors, and you can ask a lot of questions there. And they do calls as well where you can ask your questions and just like get support from the community in general. Some of them are just like more relaxed calls where it's just like talking about the business of stuff
Right.
together and all of that. So that would be a big part of it. And then as well, I hired a business coach. Her name is Demi. She's amazing. And she helped a lot with the business side of things, actually.
Right.
Um, Learning how to set up, the system so that it benefits both me and my clients, and everyone has a smooth experience and all of that. So it would be, twofold, I guess. Demi, and then that community of other book coaches has been really valuable as well.
Nice. And kind of gonna reword this question because I don't think this one is important. In those discussions with everyone that has helped you, they sort of like teach you of how to approach or how to look for the ideal client, almost sense to like how
Mm,
authors have like an ideal reader in mind. Like we want a reader
yes.
that enjoys this type of storytelling, these type of characters. They kind of view the same kind of guidelines and looking for an ideal client, like find a client that matches the same interests as you. Like if you're specifically a fantasy book coach, you want to work with young adult or fantasy fiction authors. And do you think that is important to have an initial client in mind or have a broad client base?
I think it's really important to have that client in mind, to have a clear idea of who they are. Because you can work with people outside of certain genres if you feel comfortable with that, but you should have that thing that you specialize in, because that's what you're going to be really good at, right? And you want to be able
Right.
to best serve those authors. And so for me, that looked like, okay, what genres, do I want to work with? And so, you've got the overall umbrella of like fantasy,
Right.
sci-fi, spec fic, and then everything that comes underneath that. And thinking about like what age do you want to work with, as far as like, do you want it to be YA? Do you want it to be adult?
Yeah.
Do you want it to be middle grade, children's books? Like if someone approached me and asked me to help them with a picture book, I'd be like, I'm not the person for you, because that's not the thing that I have
Right.
experience in. But if you want me to do YA or adults or NA, yes. So it's really important to know who your client is. And I found it's interesting because both Jenny Nash and Demi, the business coach, had both emphasized, like, not only do you need to know who it is that you serve, but also who it is that you don't serve. So
Right.
that helps you, narrow it down, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to work with people who put stuff out there that's going to be harmful,
Right.
yeah, or, as well as I'm not going to work with, people who do a picture book, to use that example again, just
Right.
because that's not my thing. So it's just as important to know who you're for as it is to know who you're not for. Yeah,
Definitely.
so that you can not only serve them well, but also enjoy your work yourself and feel like
Definitely.
you're able to do a good job and feel good about it at the end of the day.
I definitely think that is important too, and especially if you also look at it from the author perspective, we authors also have to have that mindset as well. As like, who are we writing for? Like, who is our audience? We know we are not going to write for, even though that may be different, because even those that aren't in our preferred genre might find enjoyment from our stories. And the same is with the main audience. And with all that together, Becca, would you say that you have now have a clear idea of who your initial clients are, as well as saying the boundaries of who are not your preferred clients to work with?
Definitely, yes. The people that I, most love to work with are people who value empathy, who value the power of words, and like the way that they use words can have an impact on people, right? And so being
Right.
conscious of that, people who see like the joy and wonder of stories, who love to explore the what if questions, and then of course, on the more technical side of things, the different genres, like I love to work with, YA, NA, fantasy, sci-fi, fairy tale retellings, historical fiction,
Right.
alternate history, steampunk, any of
Ooh,
those sorts of
okay, all
things,
right.
right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't see enough steampunk things out there. So, I mean, authors, write more steampunk, please. I love it.
But
Uh,
that is completely true, and I 100% agree, and I think it's also with me myself as an author. Like I've only say I've probably only published like a few books, like two books I've published, but I've gone over the years of like I figured out like who my audience is and what they like, and you sort of get that gathering of like loyal fans that are really eager. I cannot tell you how many times I've had my readership tell me, when's the next book coming out? It's like, I'm taking a break from that and I'm working on something else, but you're going to like it. But that is really, really cool when you have like this fan base that really enjoys what you do. And also getting feedback from fellow authors that have read your work and say that, you truly belong here. And that kind of leads into another important question I want to ask you, Becca, is have you gotten a sense of validation from other book coaches, from other editors in this field, saying that you definitely belong here? And I ask that question in the sense that I'm sure you probably may have had moments in your career where you've like may have been stressed out, may have been tired, may have had a burnout, kind of reflecting, am I actually making truly a difference? So have you had that moment of validation? And kind of like attention to that, have you ever had those bleak thoughts? And have you sort of like getting your head out of those dark times to keep moving forward?
Yeah, so I've definitely, had those thoughts. I think we all, yeah, to some level experience those. But yeah, I'm very familiar with, the feelings of like imposter syndrome
Yes.
or perfectionism. Oh my gosh. Or just moments where it's like there are days where you just feel a little more down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or where maybe you're questioning things or doubting yourself. And I find on those days, it really helps. A couple things that really help are to have people who support you, like you were talking about, that you can go to them
Right.
and be like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And so, like, for example, that best friend who's also an editor, I'll go to her and be like, here's what I'm feeling right now. And she can talk to me and be like, dude, I see you working so hard. I see how much care you put into this. I see like how deeply you care about it. And also like, and then she'll be like, and go read your testimonials, you know what I mean? And then chill. But yeah, so what helps too is to go and read, things that authors have sent me, whether that is a testimonial, or it's like a private message that they sent me where they're like, I'm so excited. I was able to write, thousands more words because of something you said
Yes.
that unlocked this idea or whatever. And it's like, okay, yes, I am good at this. There, and I am making an impact. It's not, those lies that your head whispers to you, or your brain
Right.
likes to say things like, oh, you're not doing enough, or you're not good enough, or whatever. It helps to banish those
Yes.
so much. And you started the question with asking about like other editors in the community and stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
found that overall, everyone is so, so supportive. Um, there's the community is so awesome in that they don't see each other as competition.
Right.
Um, Everyone's supporting each other, and it's like we're going to celebrate each other's wins and comfort each other if we're going through something, or like, oh, that's really cool, that course that you came up with, or that amazing thing that happened for your author, or whatever it is.
Right.
Getting to support each other. Yeah, I like to surround myself with editors and book coaches who have that same value system of like, we're not competing with each other. We're each for different people, and if one of us succeeds, we're all succeeding.
Right, definitely. And you've already mentioned your best friend who has been a big supporter of you. Are there any other specific people that you would like to mention who have been huge supporters of your career?
Yeah, so I would say, so I have two best friends. I would say the other one as well. She is like my hype man. She's awesome. She's one of those extroverted people who's like, you go, yes, you're amazing, like really awesome that way. And then I have some authors that I've been working with, in an extended way where they're like super, super supportive of me. And kind of like you were talking about fan clubs for, your
Right,
biggest fans for authors. Editors have their biggest fans too, which is really awesome. And I really, really appreciate those people. And then
right,
my family as well. I know that sometimes when people do more of an entrepreneurial sort of venture, sometimes families are not always fully supportive of that. And I
right,
feel really, really blessed that my family is. I don't get them, saying things like, oh, you can't do that, or oh, why are you doing this?
right,
Um, they always, from a young age, I would say my parents were like, if you have a dream, you should chase it, and supporting like employing myself and trying different endeavors and stuff like that. They've been very supportive of that as well, and like it's instilled that belief that I could in me.
right.
So yeah.
I 100% agree. And I am almost in the exact same way as you. When I actually started this podcast, for those who have listened to this story, I started this on Anchor. You didn't see my face, you just heard my voice, and I didn't know what to do. And over time, I started developing, my brand, who I was. By the second season, I got more guests. By the third season, was doing much better. And literally last year is when I did my YouTube channel. Even though I had it from school, yeah, this is a huge story for my listeners. My YouTube channel was actually one I had to make in high school for an assignment. And
That's
I
so cool.
rebranded it to make it something my own. And I'm very, very proud of it because I've had the pleasure of meeting a wide range of indie authors, historians, voiceover artists, book coaches. Now I have met a whole wide range of people, and I love doing this because it it brightens my scope of the people in the same field, because we're all storytellers. At the end of the day,
Mhm.
we are all storytellers. We're just going in about uh, different aspects of it. And I think you would definitely agree, Becca, that aligning yourself or bringing yourself with people that follow the same interests as you really gives you a sense that this is where I belong. This is where
Yes,
I'm meant to be.
100% agree. Yeah, you get that feeling of like, I'm where I'm supposed to be, like you said. And yeah, you got to really feel that sense of I am making a difference, and
Hmm.
I am, getting to pursue that dream with other people as well. So you're not alone in it, which
Hmm.
is really cool. So yeah, and congratulations on like the whole YouTube thing. That's awesome.
Thank you, Becca. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
I didn't know what to expect from this, but I've learned a lot from a lot of people who have told me, you're going to do this. And I'm super, super happy. And they've given me a lot of word of wisdom to really, really mold into the kind of person I want to be, this platform that I started for, which is I wanted to be open to everyone who from different historical backgrounds, who are authors of books that I typically would not read, but I want to give them a platform to express their love for their work. And I've been very fortunate to have also met people from different industries, from voiceover artists who have worked in the book industry, and now you, Becca, an editor and book coach, which is another aspect of the book world, which a lot of people, as I said, don't really take into consideration, but
Yeah.
it is very fascinating. And all the word of wisdom that I've gotten has been huge. And kind of like the last question of the interview, Becca, to you now, what is your word of wisdom to those that want to pursue this career themselves, or who don't really know what to do or how to start their own business brand in the editorial book coaching field?
Yeah. So I would definitely recommend, of course, read and then read some more. Like read a lot in the genres that you are wanting to work in and specialize in. Be really, really aware of the different genre conventions, expectations, and like practice giving that feedback and analyzing those stories before you ever even work with a real author, like sit down and create this imaginary author, that you're giving
Right,
feedback to even. And analyze that stuff and practice giving feedback in a way that is supportive and constructive,
right,
that doesn't tear anyone down or make them feel bad or anything like that, but makes them feel like they can accomplish this
right,
this thing. And then I would recommend like taking, even if it, either take a course like Author Accelerator or take master classes, or just like learn as much as you can, absorb as much as you can, and not just on the book coaching or editing side of things, but also the, like business side of things and marketing and all of that.
right,
Because if you start a business, you have to be your own marketer, you have to be
right.
your own bookkeeper, you have to be, your own manager, all those things.
Yes,
You're in charge of it all. It's you.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
It's just like for us indie authors, yes, we have more creative control over our book, but just like as you mentioned, Becca, you have to make your own brand. You have to get your own editors. You have to make your own cover art, and that definitely costs money and a lot of time. And yes, it may be at moments a very lonely venture. But if you're diligent and this is a field that you want to do, then this is where you want to be. And I definitely think that's a really important thing to almost end on before we go into the ending part of the interview, which is knowing that this is what you're going to experience if you go into this field. Because I remember one person, I forgot who it was, who said, if you want this career path and you see someone in this career path and you see the benefits and the struggles, and if you cannot honestly say that you're going to be that exact same person, then you should not be in that field if you're not willing to go through the hurdles. It's the same for any employment, for authors, for, I imagine your friends have given you the same advice for being a book coach, book editor, that yes, these are all the amazing benefits, but here is also the things that are going to come along with it. And if you can accept both of those, you're going to be fine.
Exactly. And just like, yeah, and what are you gonna do? When those, difficulties come up, like, are you just gonna throw up your hands and be like, this is too much? Or are you gonna sit down and try and figure out how to make it work, And I think a lot of it too is being open to learning, and asking questions and being curious and not being afraid to, ask people who are already in whatever, field it is that you're pursuing. Yeah,
Right.
don't be afraid to ask them questions, and learn from them, because then you can avoid maybe some of the same pitfalls. You can learn from them and not have to go through some of those things, maybe because they can give you a heads up ahead of time and
Definitely.
save yourself some of that trouble. So yeah, always be open to learning more, and willing to, and curious.
Definitely, 100%. And with that, listeners, we conclude this amazing interview with Becca. But before we officially end it today, I want to give a huge thank you to our guest for joining us and providing her insight into the editorial world, being a book coach, and so forth. Becca, thank you so much for joining us today. And where can people find and engage with you if they want to know more about you, contact you for a project of theirs, or if you're promoting any other authors who you've worked with, whose books are going to come out in the next couple of months or in a year or two?
Yeah. So you can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Becca Leigh Writes, and that is BeccaLeigh Writes, so like WRITES. I am most active on Instagram, and you can message me there if you want to. And I love chatting with you guys. Don't be afraid. I don't bite. And I also have a website, that is BeccaLeighAuthor.com, because Becca Leigh Writes wasn't available, if I remember right. So BeccaLeighAuthor.com, and it has a list of the different services I offer, and some little buttons you can push if you want to chat with me, about working with me. So you'll fill out like a very brief application form, and then it takes you to Calendly, where you can schedule a call with me, and we talk about, your goals, and if we would be a really good fit to work together. And as far as authors, I like to promote their stuff in my stories if I know that one of theirs is coming up. I know that the one that I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
Daphne's Unforgettable, that came out fairly recently, and it has, I wish I could reach it, but it has the beautiful cover. You should look it up. It's called Unforgettable by Daphne Cramsey. So that, I think, is the most recent one that came out. Check it out, and yeah, you should check out, because like I said, I love to give my authors shout outs in my Instagram stories, so you can find more of them there.
Awesome. I'll be linking all those down below so you can reach out to Becca. And this concludes officially the end of this amazing interview. Again, I want to turn over to Becca for joining us today and providing her insight. Make sure to follow her, give her a huge shout out. And as I always say with all my authors, let us help her. Let us boost her business. Let's spread the word. If you're an indie author and you're looking for an editor, then let me say that as the one scribe, Becca has my seal of approval. So definitely go reach out to her And as we said, let's all help one another in this field. So, without further ado, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Be on the lookout for future episodes this week coming soon. Until next time, bye.